I think I didn't do anything wrong, just laughed along with everyone else. We were joking about my husband, and I smiled because it was easier than defending him. I didn't realize that smile would be the moment he decided to walk out. Not in anger, but with a plan I never saw coming. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Vadia Clear, and I swear I didn't do anything wrong. It was just a few jokes, a little laughter among friends, and maybe a smile I shouldn't have held for so long. Everyone laughed, so how was I supposed to know it would end like this? With papers in my hand and eyes watching me like I'm the villain. I only wanted to remind people I was still fun, still interesting, not just someone's quiet wife standing in the corner. Martin always hated when I joked about him, said I cared more about being liked than being loved. Maybe that's true, but I never meant to hurt him. I thought he'd get over it like he always did, that he'd calm down after a few days of silence. He didn't shout, didn't threaten, didn't even argue. And that's what scared me most. I kept laughing while he started planning. Now I replay that night in my head, the sound of everyone's laughter turning sharp, the way he looked at me like he was already finished. I didn't realize quiet could be louder than rage. I didn't realize silence could be a plan. The night it all started didn't feel important at first. It was one of those rooftop bar gatherings my friends loved. Loud music, fairy lights, too many selfies. I remember thinking it was the first time in weeks I'd worn lipstick that wasn't from a meeting. I felt good, sharp, alive. Martin stood beside me in his usual quiet way, holding a drink, scanning the crowd like he was guarding something instead of celebrating. I told him to smile, but he only lifted one corner of his mouth and said he didn't see the point of pretending. That should have been the first clue. Rafa, my co-worker, spotted us near the bar and shouted my name over the music. He had that big, effortless confidence that made people turn when he laughed. He said, "You two look like opposites." And everyone around us started laughing. I laughed too, because what else was I supposed to do? Martin didn't. His face didn't even move. That stillness made me feel embarrassed, like I had to fill the silence before someone else did. So I joked back that maybe that's why it worked. He was the quiet one, and I was the one people actually listened to. The group roared. I remember the sound, sharp, too loud, bouncing off the concrete walls. Someone said, "Poor guy," and another said, "She's got him trained." I smiled, pretending it was harmless. Martin didn't say anything. He just turned slightly away, looking out over the edge of the rooftop, where the city lights blinked like distant cameras. Later, I tried to explain it to myself. I wasn't trying to humiliate him. I just wanted people to like me. I wanted to feel interesting again, like someone worth noticing. But the way he looked at me that night, it wasn't anger. It was calculation, like he was saving something in a file I couldn't see. When we got home, I kicked off my shoes, still half drunk on the noise and the compliments. Martin followed a few minutes later. He took off his jacket, folded it neatly, and hung it in the closet. No words, no sighs. Just quiet, like he was filing a report in his head. I said he could at least tell me what was wrong instead of sulking. He said he wasn't sulking. He was thinking. "About what?" I asked. He said, "About how easily you trade respect for applause." That one stung. I told him he was being dramatic, that people joke all the time. He said some jokes come with receipts. I didn't even know what that meant until later. The next morning, I woke up alone. His side of the bed was smooth, not even a dent in the pillow. On the counter, there were 2 mugs, his rinsed and spotless, mine half full and cold. A small reminder that we weren't moving together anymore, like 2 clocks set to different time zones. While I got ready for work, I saw something flash on his phone screen before it dimmed again. Downtown 3:15 p.m. No context, just that. I almost asked, but I didn't want to sound paranoid. I told myself it was some errand or client meeting. Still, something about how specific it was, 3:15, not 3, not 3:30, stuck in my head like a splinter. At work, everyone was still talking about the party. My coworker, Jenna, said I was hilarious, that I had main character energy. I liked the sound of that. She showed me a photo someone had posted, me in my red dress, hand on Martin's arm, laughing with my mouth wide open while he stared straight ahead. The caption read, "Relationship goals, opposites attract." The comments weren't kind to him. I didn't tag him when I reposted it. By lunch, the post had almost 200 likes. Rafa texted me, "You carried that room, Queen." I smiled, even though I knew I shouldn't have. When Martin texted to ask what time I'd be home, I replied, "Not sure, might grab a drink after work." He just sent back, "Okay." No punctuation, just that one word. That night I met Mira, my sister, at a little place near her apartment. She always said Martin made me too serious, that I used to have more life before him. When I told her about the rooftop jokes, she laughed until tears came. She said, "Men like him need humbling sometimes." I didn't correct her. It was nice to be the funny one again. But on the way home, I started feeling uneasy. When I walked in, Martin was sitting at the table, laptop open, light reflecting off his glasses. I thought he was working, but the screen wasn't code or spreadsheets. It was a file explorer. Folders labeled Utilities, Bank, Household. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Sorting things out." I asked what things. He said, "Just the kind that makes sense when everything else doesn't." Then he closed the laptop. I called him paranoid, told him he was reading too much into one night. He said it wasn't about one night. It was about patterns. I laughed it off, told him he should try comedy since he liked analyzing jokes so much. He said quietly, "I don't analyze jokes, I record results." I didn't reply. I just went to bed, pretending it didn't bother me. The next morning, he was gone again. I checked my phone, no text, no call. When I opened the kitchen window, the air smelled faintly like toner, the same scent from his home printer. I hadn't heard it print anything, but the tray held a single blank sheet. I crumpled it and tossed it away, annoyed at how small and empty it felt. At work, Rafa brought coffee to my desk. He said he'd heard Mr. Serious wasn't too thrilled about the rooftop comments. I told him Martin was fine, just sensitive. Rafa smirked and said, "He's lucky to have someone like you. Most people would kill for that kind of confidence." Confidence. That word kept following me, like a perfume I'd sprayed too much. When I got home, Martin was already there. He was cooking, something simple, pasta maybe, but the air between us felt wrong. I asked if he wanted to watch a show later. He said maybe. He didn't look at me when he spoke. His eyes stayed on the boiling water. "You're mad," I said. "I'm not," he replied, "then say something." He turned off the stove, set the spoon down, and looked straight at me. "I'm not mad," he repeated. "I'm just remembering." "Remembering what?" He didn't answer. Later, I found him in the guest room. He'd moved one of his notebooks there. The door was half open. I saw neat lines of handwriting filling the page. Dates, times, short phrases. One said rooftop bar, laughter directed at me. Another said crowd response, humiliation. I wanted to tear it up, to ask if he'd lost his mind. But instead, I just stood there, reading the words like they were a spell I didn't understand. He looked up suddenly, caught me. "You reading my thoughts now?" he asked. I said, "You're acting like a detective. It's creepy." He said, "Maybe detectives only exist when people lie." I told him he was twisting everything, that he couldn't handle a woman with personality. He said quietly, "Personality doesn't require witnesses." That line stayed in my head long after I left the room. The next morning, I woke to a notification on our shared calendar. He'd added another reminder, personal meeting, 11:40 a.m. No location, no details, just that. I almost confronted him about it, but then thought maybe I shouldn't. Let him have his secrets, I told myself. I had mine too. By Friday, the rooftop video had made its way around the office. Someone edited it with text across the top. The funny wife everyone wishes they had. I should have felt proud, but when I played it back, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Martin's face in the corner, still and pale, like a ghost watching the living. That night, I didn't even try to talk to him. He sat at the table again, typing something I couldn't see. I scrolled through my phone, pretending not to notice. The silence between us was thick enough to feel physical. When I finally broke it, I said, "You can be mad forever, or you can get over it." He didn't stop typing. "I'm not mad," he said again. "Just preparing." "For what?" He looked up for the first time, eyes steady, voice calm. "For proper handling." I rolled my eyes, told him he sounded like an HR memo. He smiled faintly. "You'd know those well." I went to bed before he could say more, but I couldn't sleep. Every sound, the clicking of his keyboard, the creak of his chair, the faint beep of a phone alarm, felt like a countdown. In the morning, the apartment was spotless, too clean. Even the trash bin was empty. On the kitchen table sat 2 mugs again, his dry, mine half full, and a small sticky note under my cup. It didn't say anything except one word, noted. I stared at it for a long time, feeling my throat tighten. I wanted to crumple it, throw it away, pretend it didn't mean anything. But I didn't. I folded it neatly and slipped it into my purse. Later, when I told Mira about it over the phone, she laughed. "You're overthinking it. He's just trying to make you feel guilty." "Maybe," I said, but as I hung up, I caught sight of the calendar again. Downtown 3:15 p.m., still sitting there, unchanged. And for the first time, I wondered what exactly he was doing there, and who was helping him keep such perfect time. I didn't think the rooftop thing mattered anymore. A week had passed, and life went on like it always did. Work, home, small talk that meant nothing. If anything, I was the only one still thinking about it. Martin hadn't mentioned it again, and I decided that meant he'd moved on. That's what people do when they love each other, right? They forgive, even if they don't say the words out loud. At least, that's what I told myself while I reapplied lip gloss in the office restroom, preparing for another long day of pretending everything was fine. Work had been loud lately. The new branch director wanted everyone connected, which meant more group lunches, more shared posts, more photos. Evan, my co-worker, was leading some wellness initiative, and somehow that included organizing Friday happy hours. He had that kind of easy charisma people liked, the kind that made me laugh even when I didn't want to. That Friday, the team decided to celebrate the company's quarterly results. I wasn't planning to stay long, but Evan convinced me. He said, "You've got the best laugh here. You can't leave before the pictures." I rolled my eyes but stayed. The drinks flowed fast. Someone ordered snacks. Music from someone's Bluetooth speaker filled the break room. The lights were low, the air warm with people leaning too close and speaking too loud. At one point, Evan raised a glass and toasted to the brave souls who put up with boring husbands. Everyone laughed, including me. I told myself it was just a joke, but when I saw a phone camera flash, I felt my stomach twist. A few minutes later, Jenna showed me a video on her phone. I was in it, laughing, covering my face while Evan leaned close to say something I couldn't hear over the music. The caption she added read, "Our HR queen keeping things lively." I told her not to post it, but she already had. By the time I got home that night, the video had made it to our office Slack channel. Someone had even commented, "Her husband must be a saint. I should have cared more than I did." Instead, I just scrolled through the comments, half smiling at the attention. Martin was at the dining table again, typing quietly. The same blank expression, the same neat stacks of paper. He looked up once when I came in, then went back to whatever he was doing. "You're still on that computer," I said, hanging my purse on the chair. He said, "It helps me focus." "On what? You're not even working." "Documentation." I laughed. "Of what, my sins?" He didn't answer, just clicked the mouse a few times, eyes unmoving. I wanted him to fight, to raise his voice, anything but that empty calm. "By the way," I said, trying to sound casual, "people at work are talking about you again." "About me?" "Yeah," I said, grabbing a glass of water. "They think you're kind of uptight." "It's fine. I defended you." He looked at me then, really looked. "Did you?" I shrugged. I said, "You're just not into social nonsense." Which is true. "Interesting," he said, typing again. "What's interesting?" "That you think it's defense." I rolled my eyes and walked off, pretending not to care. Later that night, I noticed something on his laptop screen before he closed it. It looked like a spreadsheet. Dates, short notes, categories. One row had the word Slack in it. Another said, "Office remarks." I laughed, thinking it was ridiculous. Who documents gossip? When I woke up the next morning, he was already gone again. His mug sat next to mine on the counter, perfectly rinsed. I checked his phone calendar out of curiosity. Still the same old pattern. Downtown, 3:15 p.m. Every weekday. I started to wonder if it was a real meeting or just something he wrote to make himself feel important. At work, I decided to lean into the attention. Everyone had seen the video anyway. I might as well make it look intentional. I posted a selfie at my desk with the caption, "Friday laughs keep morale high." It got more engagement than anything I'd posted in months. Evan commented with a fire emoji. At lunch, he asked how things were at home. "Fine," I said. "He's just quiet." Evan smirked. "Quiet's better than angry." "Sometimes silence feels worse," I admitted. He looked at me for a moment before saying, "Maybe he's realizing what he's losing." I didn't respond, but I didn't disagree either. That night, Martin didn't come home until late. When he walked in, I noticed his shirt was pressed differently, like someone else had ironed it. He said he'd been downtown again. I asked why he was always there. He said, "You'll see." I laughed nervously. "That's creepy." "Maybe," he said, "but accurate." The next morning, I found a new folder on the home computer labeled Household. When I clicked it, it was empty, except for one subfolder called Utilities. Inside was a single file named Form Draft. It was password protected. I told myself it was probably financial stuff, but it didn't feel like his usual habits. Martin wasn't organized. He left socks in the laundry for days, forgot passwords, lost receipts. This new version of him, methodical, tidy, deliberate, felt foreign. Mira called that weekend to ask how things were. I told her about Martin's weird calmness. She laughed and said, "He's probably just trying to guilt you. Don't fall for it." "Guilt me for what?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "For being you," she said. "You're the lively one. He married you for that. Now he's punishing you for it." That made sense to me. It always did when Mira said things that made me feel right. The following Monday, I got to work early. I wanted to clear out the comments from Slack before HR noticed. Too late. Damien, our branch manager, called me into his office. He said he'd seen the video and wanted to make sure boundaries were being respected. He didn't sound angry, just tired. "It was harmless," I said. "Just team spirit." He nodded slowly. "Still, appearances matter." I wanted to tell him that appearances were all anyone cared about these days. Instead, I said I'd be more careful. When I got home that night, Martin had made dinner. Chicken, rice, salad, the kind of calm, neutral meal you can't argue with. He sat opposite me, silent, eating neatly. Halfway through, I said, "We're fine, right?" He didn't look up. "Are we?" I said, "Sorry. Kind of." You said sorry for how it looked, not for what it was. I set my fork down. You make everything sound like a legal statement. Maybe that's the only language left. Something about that sentence chilled me. I tried to laugh it off. You're ridiculous. Maybe, he said, finishing his plate. But I'm consistent. After he went to bed, guest room again, I wandered into the kitchen. The fridge calendar caught my eye. He'd added another note. Personal, follow-up. No date, just a check mark next to it. I wanted to erase it, but my hand froze halfway. The next morning, I walked into work and everyone stared. My stomach dropped. Someone had printed screenshots from the video and pinned them on the break room bulletin board under office highlights. My face, mid-laugh, hand on Evan's shoulder. I ripped it down immediately. When I got home, I tried to get ahead of it. Something stupid happened at work, I told Martin. Someone printed that photo. He looked at me calmly. Which one? The one from the party. It's nothing. He nodded. Everything's nothing with you until it isn't. That should have been the end of the conversation, but I couldn't stand how composed he looked. You could defend me once in a while, I said. He said, defend you from what? People's judgment. He leaned back in his chair. They're judging what you showed them. I opened my mouth to argue, but stopped. He turned his laptop toward me. The screen showed an open document. My name. Dates. Event titles. Screenshot thumbnails. What is that? I asked, voice sharp. He said, a record, in case I need to remember correctly later. You're insane. He closed the laptop. No, he said softly. Just careful. I went to Mira's that night, furious. She poured wine and told me he was bluffing. He's trying to scare you into obedience, she said. It's a power move. I wanted to believe her, but when I came home later, the lights in the kitchen were still on. Martin wasn't there, but his phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with a message preview, file uploaded successfully. It wasn't from me. It wasn't from anyone I knew. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. I already knew it had something to do with his calm. When I finally crawled into bed, I could hear the faint sound of the printer from the other room, that low, steady whirring that used to mean bills or letters. This time, it sounded like something ending quietly. I kept telling myself it would blow over. People forget things fast. That's the comfort of the internet age. By Monday, someone new would be the office joke. But the silence at home said otherwise. Martin had stopped leaving mugs on the counter, stopped cooking, stopped filling the space with even small noises. He moved like a shadow through the house, calm and deliberate. Every time I caught him on his laptop, he minimized the screen so smoothly it looked rehearsed. That Friday was our friend group's big dinner, the kind of thing Martin used to love, because it meant everyone sitting down, pretending to be adults for a night. I almost didn't want to go. But cancelling would make me look guilty, and I refused to give anyone that satisfaction. It was held at the community hall near the river, rented out for birthdays and fundraisers. Warm light, cheap wine, familiar faces. The kind of place that photographs well, but feels fake in person. When we walked in, I noticed how people looked at us. Polite smiles that lingered too long. Eyes that flicked between me and Martin, like we were a movie playing too slowly. Evan was already there. He stood near the buffet, talking loudly, his laughter bouncing off the walls. When he saw me, he waved. "There's the star of the show," he said. A few people chuckled. Martin didn't. He just kept his hand on the back of my chair when we sat down, not touching, just resting there, like a reminder of where the line used to be. Dinner started with small talk, kids, work, vacations that would never happen. The wine flowed faster than it should have. I told a few stories about work that made people laugh, exaggerated things the way I always do. Martin stayed quiet, smiling politely. Then Evan brought it up. "Hey, remember that office video?" he said, grinning. "The one where you made everyone laugh? Classic." I felt my face heat up. I said, "Oh, that? It was nothing." He kept going. You should have seen the comments. People were obsessed. How does her husband handle all that attention? Everyone laughed again, but this time it sounded thinner. I glanced at Martin. He was stirring his drink slowly, eyes fixed on the glass. I told Evan to drop it. We're here to celebrate, not rehash old news. But Evan wasn't reading the room. Come on, it's funny, he said. You're a legend. She's something, Martin said finally, still staring at his glass. The tone made everyone quiet. Someone tried to change the subject, but I jumped in, defensive. You make it sound like I did something wrong. He looked up at me, calm as ever. Didn't you? The table went still. Forks froze mid-air. I felt the air around us thicken. I laughed it off, said he was joking, that he liked to sound philosophical when he'd had too much wine. But he wasn't drunk. He barely touched his drink. Then I made the mistake. The kind of mistake that echoes. I said, "Don't be so serious, Martin. Everyone knows you'd die without me making you interesting." A couple of people laughed nervously, but most didn't. Evan smirked, whispering something to the guy next to him. Martin's jaw tightened. He set his glass down carefully and said, "You're right, I wouldn't die. I'd just be quiet." Something in his tone made me stop smiling. Adele, his mother, was sitting 2 tables away. I hadn't even realized she'd been invited. She stood up slowly and walked over. "You don't speak to your husband like that," she said, voice calm but sharp enough to cut glass. I said, "It's just humor, Adele. You're from another generation." "Respect isn't generational," she said. Then she turned and left. Mira, sitting beside me, leaned in and whispered, "Ignore her. Some people can't handle confident women." I nodded, pretending I believed her, but my throat was dry. Martin didn't say another word for the rest of dinner. When dessert came, he excused himself to take a call. He didn't come back. When I went outside to find him, the parking lot was empty except for his car. I expected the engine to be running, the headlights on, some sign of him waiting. But the car was cold, dark, parked perfectly straight. Inside, people tried to pretend nothing had happened, but the energy had shifted. Even Evan stopped joking. I sat there until people started leaving. Mira said she'd drive me home. In the car, she tried to make it sound light. "He's just sulking. He'll come around." I wanted to believe her, but when we pulled into the driveway, the house lights were off. No note, no sound. Inside, the kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink again. The air was too still. I flicked on the light and saw the printer tray half open. A single sheet of paper sat there, blank except for one word typed in the center, noted. I froze. My pulse jumped. I told myself it was a prank, some passive-aggressive joke. But when I looked closer, I saw a faint impression on the next page in the tray, like something had been printed and removed. I went to the study. His laptop wasn't there. The drawers that used to be messy were now empty except for one locked folder box. I shook it. Something inside rattled. Metal, maybe a flash drive. I tried to find the key but couldn't. The silence was unbearable. I turned on the TV just to fill it, but even the noise sounded wrong. When Martin came home the next morning, he looked rested, almost peaceful. I asked where he'd gone. "Out," he said. "That's helpful." I wasn't trying to be. He started making coffee like it was any other morning. I said we needed to talk about last night. He said there was nothing left to talk about. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone," I said. He looked up. "Did I?" "You walked out like some martyr." He poured coffee into his mug, stirred it, and said, "No, I walked out like someone who's done pretending." I followed him down the hall, still talking, still trying to get the upper hand. "You think you're better than everyone because you don't raise your voice," I said. "But silence is just another form of control." He stopped at the door to the guest room and looked back at me. "No," he said, "it's protection." Then he closed the door. That afternoon, I tried calling Mira, but she didn't answer. When she finally texted, all she wrote was, "Adele's upset. Maybe lay low for a bit." Lay low, like I was the scandal. I spent the rest of the day scrolling through my phone, checking who'd unliked the party post. A few names were gone. Old friends, co-workers, even one of Martin's cousins. By evening, I was furious. When he came out of the guest room, I told him he was punishing me for having a personality. He said calmly, "You're mistaking attention for identity." I said, "At least I have one." He didn't rise to it, just walked into the kitchen, poured himself another cup of coffee and said, "Some identities dissolve in daylight." I didn't even know what that meant, but I hated how sure he sounded. Before bed, I noticed something new on the fridge calendar. A small dot on Saturday with the words "follow-up complete." I hadn't written it, neither had Mira. When I asked him what it meant, he said, "Progress." "Progress on what?" He rinsed his mug. "Proper handling." I tried to laugh it off again, but it came out shaky. "You sound like you're planning a murder." He looked at me, steady and calm. "No, I'm planning peace." That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I heard a faint humming from the study. I crept down the hall and peeked in. The printer light blinked. The screen on his computer glowed faintly. Folders, dates, names, everything organized. When I stepped closer, the printer finished another page. I grabbed it before it slid out fully. Just a blank sheet again. But underneath, one more page waited. I caught a glimpse before the machine whirred and pulled it back in. There were lines of text, but only one word I caught clearly: witnesses. The word stuck to me like glue. I went back to bed and stared at the ceiling until sunrise. When I woke, he was gone again. Only the faint smell of toner and the sound of a door lock clicking earlier that morning lingered. I poured myself coffee, pretending not to notice the empty space where his mug usually sat. The quiet felt heavy, like the pause before something breaks. By morning, I'd stopped pretending I didn't care. The video from dinner had already spread through our friend group chat. Mira texted first, "You're kind of trending again, LOL." I opened it and there I was, laughing too loudly, saying the line I wished I could erase. He'd die without me making him interesting. Someone had added a laughing emoji over my face. Martin wasn't even visible in the clip, just his empty chair. I told myself people were overreacting. Humor doesn't make someone a villain. Still, I deleted all my posts from the past week, even the harmless ones. The silence that followed felt heavier than judgment itself. That morning, Martin was already dressed for work when I walked into the kitchen. He poured coffee into a travel mug, just one, not two, and placed it by the door. I said, "You're leaving early?" He said, "Some things are easier in the morning." "What things?" He looked at me for a moment. "Corrections." Then he left. I stared at the counter. 2 mugs used to mean us, now one meant distance. Around noon, Mira called. "Mom says you need to fix this before Adele starts calling her," she said. I asked how Adele even saw the video. Mira sighed. "Someone from church sent it. You know how fast gossip moves." I said it wasn't my fault if people didn't get humor. She said, "Then stop defending it like you're proud." That one stung more than I wanted to admit. When I got home, the house looked too clean. Martin had cleared his desk completely. The printer was unplugged, the paper tray empty. The only thing left was a single USB drive placed in the center of the table, labeled Archive A. I touched it, then pulled my hand back. It felt like opening. It would make something real I wasn't ready for. I told myself he was bluffing, that he'd cool off eventually. But when I checked my phone, our joint credit card alert flashed red. Transaction declined. I called him. He answered after the second ring. "Did you cancel the card?" I asked. "I adjusted access," he said. "Access? You mean my access?" He didn't argue, just said, "You said once you wanted independence. You have it." I tried to sound calm. "You can't just do that." "I can," he said, and I did. Then he hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked past the guest room and paused. The door was closed, but a sliver of light glowed underneath. I knocked. No answer. I pushed it open a little. He wasn't there. The bed was neatly made, and a small folder sat on the desk labeled Utilities, Final. When I opened it, there were photocopies, bills, statements, and a note written in his tidy handwriting. Everything divided properly. For peace. I wanted to tear it apart, but didn't. I left it exactly as it was, afraid of confirming what I already knew. The next morning, I overslept. When I dropped our daughter Elena at school, she asked from the back seat, "Why are you and Daddy not eating breakfast together anymore?" I froze. "Daddy's busy lately, that's all." She looked out the window and said quietly, "He says busy means sad." I didn't answer. After I parked back home, I saw the neighbor, Mrs. Duran, trimming her hedge. She waved, but didn't smile. I could tell she'd heard something too. Word traveled in this neighborhood faster than air. Inside, I checked Martin's desk again. The USB was gone. In its place sat a printed note that simply said, "Meeting confirmed." I called Mira, panicked. "He's doing something, I don't know what." She hesitated. "Maybe it's legal." "What?" "I didn't want to tell you like this, but Adele said he's been seen at the courthouse. Maybe for advice." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "That's ridiculous. You don't get legal advice because of a few jokes." She said, "You've been saying that for weeks." That night, I tried to talk to him when he came home. He looked tired, calm, untouchable. I said, "This has gone too far. We can fix it." He said, "We? You mean me fixing what you break?" I crossed my arms. "You're acting like I committed a crime." He looked at me evenly. "Some things don't need police to be crimes." "You're twisting words again." He nodded slowly. "You taught me well." He walked past me toward the study. I followed, standing in the doorway. "What's in the file?" I asked. He said, "Proof, so I don't have to argue anymore." "Proof of what? That I laughed too loud?" He said, "That you laughed at me." The way he said it, not angry, not loud, just finished, made my stomach turn. Before bed, I checked my phone again. A new calendar alert popped up from our shared account. 9:30, courthouse. I stared at it until the screen went dark. When I woke up, he was already gone. His closet half empty, drawers neat. On the kitchen table sat a breakfast plate covered in plastic wrap, toast, eggs, and a note beside it. "For Eleanor, not you." That was the first time I realized he wasn't bluffing. I called Mira again, but she didn't pick up. I left a message, my voice shaking. "He's serious, Mira. He's really doing something." No reply came. That afternoon, I drove to the school to pick up Elena early, just to have someone next to me who still looked at me like I mattered. She climbed into the car, quiet, small hands clutching her backpack. After a few minutes, she said, "Daddy told me to pack some clothes for a sleepover this weekend." I gripped the steering wheel. "Where?" "With Grandma Adele," she said. "He said it's only for a few days." The sound in my ears went thin, like wind through a crack. I smiled anyway, said, "That's fine, baby." But when I parked back home, the driveway was half empty. His car gone. His work files gone. His world, it seemed, already reorganized. I sat at the table, staring at the space where the USB had been. My phone buzzed once. An unknown number, no message. For the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel calm. It felt final. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Martin hadn't said much, hadn't yelled, hadn't thrown anything. It was all so quiet, so controlled, that I kept thinking it was a game, a test. Maybe if I laughed more, smiled wider, flattered him just right, he'd give up on whatever mysterious handling he was doing. But by Saturday, I could see the pattern. The house had changed. His side of the bed was untouched. The kitchen counters were cleared, except for his coffee mug, rinsed and perfectly placed. The printer tray held a single blank page, another reminder, I told myself, of nothing. I called Mira in desperation. "He's gone too far this time," I said. She sighed. "Vadia, maybe he's not bluffing. Did you see that calendar alert yesterday?" I waved it off. "It's just a reminder. He's dramatic, that's all." "Dramatic?" she asked. "The same man who used to leave socks on the floor, who forgot to pay bills until the last second." I laughed nervously. "He's just being careful." Mira didn't respond for a while. Then she said quietly, "Or he's planning something." Her voice stayed with me all day. That afternoon, I tried to push it out of my mind. I called Evan, hoping for distraction. We laughed about office nonsense, silly projects, weekend plans. I told him everything was fine. He said, "Sure, if you call being ignored at home fine." I laughed too loudly. "He's dramatic. Always has been." He paused. "Yeah, maybe he just decided to handle it differently this time." I frowned. "Handle what?" "Everything," he said. "You know, all of it." I hung up, feeling a little hollow. Martin came home that night just before dinner. I tried to act normal. "How was your day?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Complete." "Complete?" He nodded. "Yes. Everything accounted for." I went to the kitchen and started cooking anyway. "Well, at least one of us is still living in the world of normal," I said. He stood behind me for a moment, quiet, then said, "Normal is irrelevant when the rules have changed." I spun around. "Rules? What rules?" "The ones you taught me by example," he said. "Public is power, private is protection." I didn't know what to say. That sentence, calm and almost polite, made me want to scream. Instead, I forced a laugh. "You sound like a lawyer," I said. "Maybe," he replied. "Or maybe someone who knows how to prepare." After dinner, I went to the living room to scroll through my phone. The Slack post from work, the video from the dinner party, all the little moments where I had laughed at him or teased him flashed before me. Each one now felt heavier. I heard him in the study, moving around quietly. The faint hum of the printer started again. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just him keeping things organized. But when I glanced toward the door, I saw the faint glow of his laptop screen and a USB sitting next to it, labeled with a date. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to know what was on it. That night, as I tried to sleep, I thought about the daughter's question a few days earlier. "Why are you and Daddy not eating breakfast together anymore?" I realized she was the first to notice the change, the first to understand that something had shifted. And the thought that he had already started planning without us, with her included, made my chest tighten. By Sunday morning, I decided to confront him. I walked into the study, laptop in hand, trying to look casual. "We need to talk," I said. He didn't look up. "We do?" "Yes, about everything, about how this feels out of control." He finally closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. "This isn't about control," he said. "It's about resolution." "Resolution?" I repeated, incredulous. He nodded. "Proper handling. Everything accounted for. Nothing lost. Nothing misunderstood." I laughed nervously. "You sound like you're planning a battle." "No," he said, calm, measured. "I'm planning clarity." I wanted to argue, to make him see that he was overreacting, but the look in his eyes stopped me. Not anger, not sorrow, just certainty. That afternoon, I noticed something else. The calendar on the fridge had a new alert, personal file drop. I didn't recognize it. When I asked him, he said, "Preparation requires notice." I wanted to roll my eyes, but I didn't. That tiny bit of fear, that spark in my chest, told me this wasn't a bluff. Later, I tried to tempt him. "Maybe I'll stay with a friend for a few nights, just to give you space," I said casually. He looked at me, calm as ever. "You can do that," he said, "if you want to see how things settle." I thought he meant I'd be lonely. But later, as I lay in bed, I realized he meant I'd see consequences. The following morning, I woke to find another calendar alert. Downtown 9:30, document drop. I stared at it. My pulse quickened. I called Mira, desperate. "He's serious, Mira. This isn't a joke anymore." She hesitated. "Vadia, maybe he's finally doing it properly, legally." "What do you mean?" she said quietly. "I don't know the details. Just be careful." That day, I spent every minute scanning my phone, checking social media, replaying all the videos and posts I'd shared over the past few weeks. Every joke, every tease, every laugh directed at him felt like evidence now. And I couldn't stop thinking that Martin had already started gathering his own version. When he came home that evening, he didn't look at me. He poured a single cup of coffee, set it on the counter, and went straight to the guest room. I followed, standing in the doorway. I said, "You're really not going to fight me on this?" He looked up calmly. "Fighting isn't necessary." "Necessary?" "Yes. Proper handling requires no shouting, no threats, no drama, only accuracy." I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him he was ridiculous. Instead, I watched him move like someone who had already won. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the faint hum of the printer from the study, even though I knew it wasn't plugged in. The thought of what he might be printing, what he might be preparing, kept my stomach in knots. By the next morning, I realized something I hadn't before. Martin wasn't angry. He wasn't reacting. He was executing. And I had no idea what the outcome would be. I poured coffee for myself and noticed his mug was gone. The USB I had seen the night before was gone too. On the counter sat a small note. Handled properly. I picked it up, turned it over, and held it like a warning. That's when I understood. This wasn't about revenge. This was about consequences. No yelling. No threats. Just methodical, deliberate, lawful preparation. I didn't know what was coming next. I arrived at the courthouse lobby, heart racing, expecting confrontation. Martin stood calm, holding a clerk's clipboard. She handed me the papers, divorce petition, custody arrangements, property division, all formal, precise. The room went quiet as co-workers and neighbors glanced up. Martin said simply, "You taught me public is power. I chose proper." I stared at the documents, the weight of every joke and post finally landing.